I didn't even think of myself like as a refugee until like I was asked to do this. And one of my colleagues was like, yeah, I know your story. I think that you would be awesome for this. And I was like, I'm not sure if I'm like a refugee, because I always had this mental picture of a refugee being from like somewhere in like Africa and like really like gruesome, violent. But that was pretty much where we were. Like we were leaving our country, leaving everything behind to escape a very violent situation, to literally save our own lives. I think refugees, when you're escaping masses and murder masses, I think that that's like what a refugee is. When you're leaving everything behind, when you're starting a new life, I think that that's what a refugee is. Carolina, Correa. I am originally from Medellin, Colombia, and I currently live in Providence, Rhode Island. So the time when I was growing up in Colombia, there was a lot of violence. I mean, we weren't even allowed to go to malls because it was like car bombs. It was a very dangerous country. The time they put a cap on my family, and they started murdering my entire dad's family, and then they started doing it to my mom's side of the family. And I think that that's when my mom decided that if we wanted to survive, we needed to, join a refugee program to be able to escape the violence that was going on in the early 90s and late 90s in Colombia. And I think I was always that kid that was like, why do I have to leave school? Like, why do we have to move again? Why? I was a very curious child, and I think it was never sugar-coated. It was like, this is what's going on, and we're being chased, and you could die if you go outside. They can kill you, they can kidnap you. So it's very open. When my family started getting attacked, they took us out of school. We actually moved every 3 months. We wouldn't be able to stay in a location. It was living in fear all the time. I think that at a very young age, you just constantly felt like they were gonna come into your house and either take your family or murder you. So I think it was a constant phase of not being sure if you were gonna make it to the next day, which, by the time that you're like 25, you figured you felt a lot of emotions. And I think that fear is probably the scariest, strongest emotion a human can feel. It's not as easy as people think it is. It's actually a little bit tough to get into some of these programs, especially in Colombia. At the time, America was really resilient about giving us refugee. They weren't taking Colombian refugees, so you would have a lot of internal refugees. You would have people who would just go to other cities and villages and try to survive there because they didn't have the means or resources to kind of escape the country. I went to a Boys and Girls Club, and I met mentors who literally believed in me more than I believed in myself. Like, they didn't just push me to learn the language, but they were like, you're not just learning the language, you're going to graduate valedictorian. So they believed a lot in me, and they pushed me to do that every single day, even when I didn't believe it. Even when I didn't want to learn how to swim, they were like, no, you're going to learn how to swim, and you're going to get a full ride to school. So I think I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for an organization like that. And there's so many other organizations that do that for it. It's like being active and being proactive and really finding places like that. When I came here, that in itself was a trauma because it's the cultural difference, the language barrier. You don't have kind of like that family support. So it was very difficult to get adjusted to a new country, especially because I had my mom remarried, and I had a stepfather who was struggling with second kidney failure, and it was forcing my mom to work multiple jobs to meet ends meet. And so I had to kind of just, take care of my little brother, either walking him to school every morning, helping him with his homework, even attending parent-teacher conferences. I think by 14, I felt like I was already grown. So I did, but I think that looking back at it now, it taught me a lot of lessons about life, and it definitely gave me the work ethic that I'm not sure every 15-year-old would have had. I think that I was a little bit scarred with like everything that was going on, that I wasn't even like looking forward to coming, but I've never seen a squirrel in my life. Like, it was just like the little things that like, I'm like, oh my God, everything's so different. The snow, just the language for me was a huge barrier. Kind of that culture of, we're a very warm country, and this one's a little bit more, I wouldn't say colder, but I would say it's a more held back. Like, I would know my neighbors, and I would go to my neighbors all the time. In Colombia here, I think I met my neighbor maybe a year ago, and I lived there for like 5, so it's a little different. It's not what I expected, especially when you come from a country where there's always so much violence. It's hard once you live here to go back there, and it's like, oh my God, how did I ever live that? So yeah, it's completely different. You do get a lot of kind of little nuances of, oh, I went to a very predominantly white school, and I would never forget, I was in a race with somebody, and they, you shake hands before you swim, you run, jump, and you race. And then when we got out, I actually won the race, and she's like, I didn't know Colombians could swim. And I didn't know if I was like an insult or like a compliment. And it's like little things that people would say. And of course, we always get the nuance of, Pablo Escobar, or you come from the land of Coke. And unfortunately, I did come from that. But fortunately, like, I've made it. And I think that you grow from stuff like that. You gotta grow from something. Like, I think that you can't let that affect you. And I think sometimes we live in a world where people allow those comments to impact you so much that they kind of cripple you, and you kind of have to use them more as foundation blocks to build a stronger person. It was a blessing that I was able to leave, although I miss my country all the time, and I know that it was kind of like a plague. I just like, for 10 years, it was like this horrible place to be, but it was still your home. And it's made such an amazing progression now. So looking back at it, I'm glad I left, but I'm glad that I came from that. I think that people that want to help refugees is be open-minded and ask a lot of questions. I don't think a lot of the people, when I first came here, knew what was going on. And I had one person who was very curious about my life and like why I was so quiet, why I was so shy. Like, I had these things with exits. Like, I always had to sit near an exit. I always had to, like, I had to be the first one in line for things. Like, it was certain things that I would do. And he was very curious about my life and like what was going on. And he was persistent. And to this day, he's one of my greatest mentors. And he just got to know me and my strengths and my challenges and my struggles. And it's kind of becoming open-minded to that and be persistent about what are this person's issues are and what are their challenges, and trying to be supportive in that way, and just simply trying to understand. I think that means a lot, because I don't think that you can change what's already happened. I think it's more like, how do we rebuild now? I think I always told myself, if I survive that, like, I can survive anything. Like, if I made it this far, I can't stop now. Like, you have to continue. Like, just make it worth it. So I think that's what I would tell them. I would tell them that just whatever you do, as cliche as it sounds, don't give up. I mean, this is the land of opportunities, and you just sometimes have to go out there and get those opportunities. It's not going to knock on your door. And sometimes, yeah, it sucks that we have a lot of barriers. It is a rough time, but I think that when you really sacrifice those first couple of years that you're here to really get on your feet, I think eventually it will be worth it.
So do you think that you'll return to Colombia one day?
Oh my God, absolutely. I actually recently went back, and seeing it grow so much, and like you have to have so much strength to go through what Colombia went through about 20 years ago and to what it is now. I mean, we just got nominated as most innovative city in the world. They hold the biggest parades, flower parades. They lowered their crime rate by 80%. You have phenomenal people there. So I think that you can't let situations ruin a country and ruin people and a culture. And I absolutely love to go back there. It inspires me just to see the strength of the nation. It gives me strength to continue and say, you know, like, they might have knocked it down a little bit, but we just gotta brush our shoulders off and continue on. So I absolutely would.